Hello, everybody, and welcome into this week's 30 Minutes program. This is Paul Tinkle, and I want to take just a moment and say how wonderful it is to have Bobby Goode in the studio with me today to talk about the late President Jimmy Carter. Bobby Goode spent 38 years with the USDA, the United States Department of Agriculture, Rural Development State Director of Tennessee, January 6th, and I want to go back and talk about this for a couple of moments because Bobby Goode has spent his life serving people across the United States, but particularly here in Tennessee. He was honored in 2009 when he was appointed to the position of Tennessee State Director of Rural Development by President Barack Obama. And under Bobby's leadership, the agency has assisted more than 1.5 million Tennessean families and businesses, including 233 communities in all 95 counties in Tennessee, investing more than $7.6 billion through affordable loans, guarantees, and grants. And now he's the vice president of the Tennessee Wildlife Federation, and he continues to farm, and he continues to spend his, as you can hear, that's the Federation. And I've never started one out like this with the phone and having the ducks on there. But, Bobby, let me say to you first how grateful I am to have you to spend a few minutes in talking about President Jimmy Carter, because you have a relationship with him that goes back many, many years. And the people here in Weakley County in West Tennessee and, of course, in the Kentucky area, Kenton area, that you have a wealth of, I guess you'd call it memories with Jimmy Carter. So tell me about him.
Yes, Paul. First of all, just thank you for asking me to talk about or have the honor to talk about President Jimmy Carter. My career actually started under his administration. I was hired in at USDA several years ago now, around 47, I guess, years ago now. But later on in life, when I became state director and had met several people across the United States, Melinda and I had a very good friend in Plains, Georgia, and she had invited us to come and visit one of President Carter's Sunday school lessons, which we had both wanted to do. We'd always heard that he taught Sunday school in Plains at his church, the Maranatha Baptist Church in Plains. And so we just thought this is a great opportunity. So we went down, we stayed in her home. When we arrived, she talked to us a little bit and said, hey, we're going to have some guests tonight at dinner. And when they get there, you know, what to expect. Well, Melinda and I, neither one still realized that was going to be the former president of the United States and former First Lady. Later on in the day, through the discussions, we realized, because of Secret Service type things, that they were going to be the guest. Our friend lived just a couple of houses down from the Carters, and she later on really became one of their better friends and caretakers, and we've remained friends all these years. One of the funny things is that during that dinner, we ate on paper plates. So I had a meal, or Melinda and I had a meal with President Carter and First Lady Rosalind Carter on paper plates. And the reason was because we had to buy our dinner from the Plains Volunteer Fire Department because they were having a Valentine's Day fundraiser. And so, of course, typical Jimmy Carter, you had to buy something local from a fundraiser to have dinner. The Secret Service went and picked it up. President Carter asked Melinda to go first in line. And Melinda said, oh, no, sir, I can't go in front of you. I really can't. And he said, well, how about Rosalind go and then you? And she said, okay, I will follow the First Lady. So anyway, we went through line. We had a very pleasant meal with them. The one thing that impressed me a lot, several things have impressed me with him, but with that meal, he talked to Melinda and I about our family. He asked questions about how many children we had, what they did, where we lived, what, you know. Well, and of course, he was well aware of Governor McWhorter in Dresden, Tennessee. He had been to UT Martin, one of, I believe, the only president that had ever been there. So he was interested in our family. And I do remember Melinda asked him, she said, I have my Bible with me. What's the Sunday school lesson on tomorrow? So I can look at it tonight and be ready for it. And he told her, and she opened it up, and somewhere in her Bible, she's got his notes written, I'm sure. But so when we got finished, he said, hey, we have a gift for you. And he presented us with, he has one of his many books is an NIV Bible, and it's life lessons I've learned from the Bible. And it actually, he and Rosalind Carter signed it to the Goode family. And, you know, that's kind of impressive that it wasn't to Bobby and Melinda, but it was to our family. And, of course, it's a very prized possession of ours. But what it is an NIV Bible, and as you're going through it, there will be pages that are his actual Sunday school lessons he has taught through the years. He told that day that he had also taught Sunday school lessons while he was president. And as far as we know, of course, he would have been the only president that taught Sunday school. And what he did, the Secret Service would take him to the church near the White House, and they had a room, upper room, that he would go in, and some select people from either his administration or be there, and he would take time to teach a Sunday school lesson as president of the United States. I actually had the honor of attending that church service twice while he taught. One time was, the first time was with Melinda, and we stayed at my friend's house and just had a wonderful weekend. It actually was President's Day weekend, and it was Valentine's weekend, so it was a special time. But the next time, Tommy Moore, my neighbor, had always told me, I want to go see Jimmy Carter teach a Sunday school class. Well, my friend called, and it was after he had had cancer, and she called and said, if you want to come again, you need to come on, because I believe Rosalind had actually fallen and broken her hip. He had had cancer. So I went across the street and said, Tommy, if we're going, we got to go now. So Tommy, Jimmy Smith, and Josh Moore and I we drove down to Plains, went to the church, actually had lunch with all the church ladies. So we had a great visit because, you know, Tommy and Jimmy had lots of stories to tell and ask them. So I actually got to go to the Sunday school class twice, but I also actually had dinner with him again. About 7 or 8 of us state directors were invited down to Plains, and he and Miss Carter came to dinner with us. I didn't sit at the table with him because I had already sat at a table with him, so I let other people do that. But what an honor to meet such an important man in my life, an important man in our country, an important man in the world, because after he became president, he did so much humanitarian work all around the world, from disease prevention to election security, to make people have fair elections. Of course, most everyone knows about his Habitat for Humanity work because he was the light in that for years. Most people remember when President Clinton, Hillary Clinton, Vice President Gore, Tipper Gore, all came to Salem Missionary Baptist Church in Gibson County to do Habitat for Humanitarian work. Tommy and Steve and several other people from Weakley County, I think it was the Weakley County Habitat Association, went and helped with that work. Most people believe that the reason the sitting president and vice president came to do that work was because on September 1st is President Clinton's birthday, and he always does a day of service. And they believe that former President Carter convinced him that he needed to do this special work for this church that had been burned by arson. And so that's why they were in West Tennessee. So it was just such an honor to be with him more than one occasion.
If you've just joined us in our program here today, Bobby Goode is with us, and we're talking about President Jimmy Carter, who passed away just a few days ago. Let me ask you a couple of questions. We're going to come back to the habitat discussions that we were going to have here in a minute. But the one thing about, and in my judgment, the one thing about President Carter in that early point, he's not like any other president that we have ever seen. And I say that because here's a guy that was a peanut farmer, and to look at him, he looks like an old country boy, if you will. And the second thing is, he didn't have a ton of money. I mean, yes, he had some money, but he started from the ground roots out. And ironically, the relationship with Ned Ray McWhorter, who was the Tennessee House Speaker at the time, by the way, and the President of the United States, these two guys got to know each other pretty well. Tell me about that.
Well, they did get to know each other very well. And like I said, he actually came to a Ned Ray Day at the University of Tennessee at Martin.
That was in 1982, and about the second week of December. And it was the biggest crowd that had ever been in that ballroom and will ever be. I mean, the fire marshal, I'm telling you, they didn't have him in town that night. But it was an overwhelming crowd of who's who, which included Charlie Daniels, Senator Wendell Ford, who was a governor at one time. And then, of course, the list goes on, including, the Sassers, the Gores, and, I mean, there was just a whole lot of people, the late Congressman Ed Jones. But what my takeaway from that was a very humble man who came to share his respects to Ned Ray McWhorter. Now, that you don't see that. You don't ever see that with anybody. Can you think of anything like that?
No, but what a great Christian man. And I know Jimmy Smith has shared this story with me that he was an intern.
Jimmy Smith, by the way, is the General Sessions Judge in Obion County.
And a good friend of mine. We've been friends since we were teenagers. And Jimmy shared a story with me that he was an intern in Congressman Jones' office. And that during the election, the primary that Jimmy Carter was running for president, he said several of the candidates would come to D.C. and politic. And when they did, the interns would all get together and go see them, go listen to what they had to say. And he said when Jimmy Carter spoke, they were all so impressed by what type of person he was and what service record he had and what all he had done. But when they got through, the comments were, boy, it would be great for a man like that to be president, but somebody like that's never got a chance to be president of the United States. And little did they know that he would become president of the United States. And as you said, he was just such a fine human being. He was raised like most of us in rural Tennessee, except he was rural Georgia. I mean, he was raised on a peanut farm, and if you ever go to Plains, you can understand the peanut world, because like in around where I grew up in Crockett County, we heard cotton gins all fall. Well, in Plains, you hear peanut dryers running all fall. But he was just from humble beginnings. So was his wife. He had a great naval career.
And he was on a submarine.
Yeah.
And then came home.
And matter of fact, this year, the White House Historical Society always puts out a Christmas tree ornament. And this year, in honor of his 100th birthday, it was an anchor, and it honored the Navy. It had a picture of the White House on it. It honored the Navy, and it was because of Jimmy Carter's service and his 100th birthday.
Mm-hmm. You were talking about the visit that President Carter came. What do you remember about that? Where do you see where you have somebody like that comes to a small town like this? And, of course, Secret Service all around. And we're kind of people that You won't need the Secret Service here. Maybe the Highway Patrol to escort you, but not the Secret Service.
Well, I don't have a lot of memories of that happening around here because really you don't see the Secret Service around much unless you are having a major principal in attendance. Later, of course, in my years in D.C. and working for USDA as state director, I had a lot of Secret Service involvement, but not here locally. You just don't see that. You know, like you said, if you see a THP officer or a couple of sheriff's deputies, that's about what we get.
What was Mrs. Carter like?
Oh, she was like your grandmother, really and truly. She was like your grandmother. Just very sweet, very attentive to him, but not submissive to him at all. I mean, she was her own person. I believe he listened to what she had to say. I do believe that even when he was president, because I think they were what we would call today a power couple. But they were one. When they married, they became one, and I think they operated as one. She was very sweet. Now, when Jimmy and I and Tommy and Josh attended the church service, she had just broken her hip, and she was not able to be there. The thing about the church service is he does his Sunday school lesson, and most of the time it's a very small church, but it's very crowded. And getting in is difficult sometimes, especially after he had cancer, because people realize that, hey, this might not go on forever. I need to go see this man. Well, he would always say, if you will stay for worship, you can get your picture made with me. And he would say, the reason is because I know several people here came to see me and maybe have never heard about God or Jesus or religion. But if you stay for worship, you can get your picture made. And at one time, the first time we went, they would go outside and everybody come up one or two at a time and get your picture made with them. When Jimmy and Tommy and I came, he had, like I said, had been in poor health. He was still doing the Sunday school lesson. And so we got to, because of my friend, we got to stay back to be the last people to go talk to him. But he was sitting in a chair and you would just go up and get your picture made. And so we actually got to visit with him and talk to him for a few minutes. One of the special things in that church, all the offering plates were handmade by him. He was a woodworker. Of course, it's humanitarian work. He did a lot of carpentry, but he was a woodworker. And all the offering plates were done by him. And it's funny, you flipped it over and it said, handmade by J.C. And it wasn't Jesus Christ. It was Jimmy Carter, you know.
Right.
And you had a big wooden cross in the church, and he had made it also. But he was just a country gentleman that actually became president of the United States.
A strong Baptist man at that.
A very, very strong Baptist, but I would say a stronger Christian. He wanted the world to know about Christ more than he wanted them to know about Baptist or Methodist or whatever denomination.
There were he actually did, and I don't know that the mainstream media in this world recognizes all the things that he did do that were, I mean, think about the peace treaty that took place, for example. You can jump in on that right now.
Yeah. What a great thing. And you know, a lot of people believe that had a lot to do with his Christian values and his study of the Bible and his travel to the Middle East, because those people, I forgot how many wars they had been in just 40 years together, you know, against each other. And he brought them together and actually mediated a peace treaty that lasted for several years.
And we're talking specifically about the most visible in the Middle East with the signing of the Camp David Accords, giving back the Panama Canal to Panama, and, of course, signing the SALT II nuclear arms reduction treaty. And then there is the Soviet leader, Leonid Brezhnev, and a lot of other things, including the toughest thing, I think, that he dealt with from the observation of being in my position, and that would have been the hostage crisis. I mean, it was huge.
The hostage crisis, I would say is what ended his presidency, because it was such a huge thing. And if you remember, we had a fuel embargo about the same time. So there were some really bad things that happened toward the end of his presidency. I don't know that it had anything to do with him personally, but it was just world politics. But look at all the world leaders that he touched with, if nothing else, just his kindness and his gentle manner. And as I said earlier about Melinda and I, he wanted to know about your family. He wanted to know about where you were brought up and how you lived and how you lived your life. He was not only a country gentleman, but a genuine, true American, but a president for the whole world, because he wanted the world to live together in peace.
What kind of, we're obviously going to have 30 days of recognition of the president. All the flags across the country are at half-staff, or should be today, for 30 days to honor the late President Jimmy Carter. If you've just joined us, by the way, Bobby Goode is my guest, and we're talking about a man that has touched his life deeply, and at the same time, he knew where Weakley County, Tennessee was.
That's right, because he was here. He knew a lot about Tennessee just because, we touched Georgia. But he was just a different type of man that we normally know as president. And I think it was because of his rural background, his country background.
What did he do that made you feel good about being in the USDA program, the state director of Tennessee?
Well, of course, being a peanut farmer or being in the ag economy, he had understanding of farm life and of rural people. And, with the agency I ended with, which did water and sewer and at one time telephone and electricity and broadband later, it takes a special person to understand that, because most big politicians are from urban areas, have never lived like we live, where you needed potable water to drink, or your cattle needed a well, or your input cost in crops needed to be reduced and the price of crops needed to go up. But he actually understood that because he lived that life. He went to a very small, Plains is, I don't know how I would compare it to a town around here, maybe Gleason and Plains, about the same size. It did have a railroad through it, had a lot of peanut dryers and peanut stuff in it.
We're leaving out unintentionally a congressman that he was very close to, and that was Ed Jones.
Oh, very much so. Congressman Jones and he were very close. I do think a lot of it was because of their backgrounds. They were similar. They grew up on farms, and they grew up as, I wouldn't say poor people, but it wasn't like they had all the money in the world, or like some of the people that had gone before them, either in Congress or after, or even for sure presidents, because or governors, because usually it takes a lot of money to run for those offices and then to continue to hold those offices. And they both grew up around Ed Jones around dairy cows and Jimmy Carter around peanuts. So
Tip O'Neill was a good friend without any question. He was the Speaker of the House for many years, and there's not any doubt in my mind that they had a relationship as well.
Right, and then Tip O'Neill had a great relationship. Tip O'Neill was a Democrat, and Ronald Reagan, when he won, he and Tip O'Neill had a great relationship that they'd get together at night and have a drink and talk about what was going on in the House and what needed to be done. Interesting point of that, Tip O'Neill's page and I was actually a page for Congressman Ed Jones back in 1975. Tip O'Neill's page and he was from Oklahoma, and he and I were very good friends, and he came to Alamo and spent the weekend, or really spent about a week with us. So Tip O'Neill's page and I had a great relationship.
When you've got the House, you pretty much, and you're a Democrat as a president, you pretty much can get a lot of things done. You got it on the table for sure.
Oh, that's true. And of course, if you have both of them, you can get pretty much anything you want done. Of course, it's pretty normal after 2 years for whoever has the White House not to have the House anymore. So
we got a few more minutes with Bobby Goode as we talk about the late President Jimmy Carter. His funeral, while being very well recognized, and we're going to hear about this here in the near future, but he's going to be buried in Plains, Georgia.
That's correct. Rosalind Carter is buried there. Their home is like anybody's ranch-style home in Martin, Tennessee. Nothing extraordinary or big about it. It does have property around it now that it didn't have for a long time. With is fenced because of security reasons. It has to. Of course, all former presidents have Secret Service security details. We met his that. When we had dinner with him or when we had dinner twice, his, like I said, picked up our dinner when we had it at our friend's house. But a story was told to me about his Secret Service. One of his Secret Servicemen said that no matter where they were after he was president, they had to be home Saturday night so he could teach his Sunday school class on Sunday morning, because that meant so much to him. And, even after he had cancer, very quickly he returned to teaching that Sunday school class.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask you if you came in contact with any of his other family members. There's one that everybody knew.
Oh, Billy, no, but no, Billy's daughter, I have met her, and Melinda has too. And I believe she was maybe the minister of music at the church when Tommy and Jimmy and Josh and I went. But I have met his grandson and his two great-grandsons. I actually had the opportunity of being more or less what you call their advance people at the Democrat National Convention. His grandson was just down to earth like him. Like, he is actually over the Carter Center, so he has a very important role, because the Carter Center is not just a Jimmy Carter Library. It does humanitarian work all around the world. But I will tell you this one little local story. They came in a little early, and like I said, I was their person on the ground. And so we were watching rehearsals at the convention, and Patti LaBelle came out, and of course she was rocking it down, and we said, let's just move up there and listen to Patti or watch her, because during rehearsal you're just right at the stage. Well, all of a sudden they started scrolling these names through, and it was the people that had passed in the last 4 years, Democrats or people important to the party. Well, all of a sudden he went, oh, there's my grandmother's name. And on the next page was Roy Herron. And I went, oh my God, there's my friend Roy Herron's name. And so we both kind of got teary-eyed. And so I said, hey, we got to stay. We got to take a picture of this. So when it scrolls through again, his grandmother came up on that page, and on like the very next page was Roy Herron's name. So that was pretty neat to be with his grandson and his great-grandsons and their grandmother and great-grandmother's name come up.
Carter Museum, or the Carter Center. If you ever have a chance to go, learn about all of your presidents and the history and so forth. Bobby, thank you so much for coming in today and to sharing the life that you got to know personally, the late Jimmy Carter and Ms. Carter. And I appreciate you for spending some time, particularly at a short notice. We didn't know we were going to be doing this, but the bottom line to all of this is you were able to tell a story about Jimmy Carter from here in Weakley County. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
That's our program today. We hope you've enjoyed our program, and we hope that you will join us each week and at the same time here for 30 Minutes. Paul Tinkle, pre-recorded.
You've been listening to 30 Minutes, a community affairs program on Thunderbolt Radio. You can listen to this broadcast and others anytime by visiting thunderboltradio.com and following the Thunderbolt Radio and Digital YouTube page. Thanks for listening.